Hi everyone, so my topic for today is the continuation topic of session 8 and 9 about learning theories. The following are classical conditioning, operant learning or the stimulus response theory, and a social learning theory. So first, what is learning? So learning is the process by which an activity originates or is it chance through reacting into an encountered situation, provided that the characteristic of the change is activity cannot be explained on the basis of native response tendency, maturation, or temporary state of the organism. So in learning theories, offer frameworks that help understand how information is, how used knowledge is created, and how learning takes place. Where learning designers can also apply these frameworks according to different learning and learner needs and make more informed decisions about choosing the right instructional practice. So ang learning theories, so mauday na makatabang sa pagsabot kung giunsa paggamit ang mga informasyon, giunsa pagkahibalo o giunsa pagkat-on sa mahitabo na mahimo og mas maalamon ng mga desisyon mahitungod sa pagpili sa husto nga pamaagi sa pagtudlo. So the learning theories, first one we have the classical conditioning. So classical conditioning is a type of learning that happens unconsciously. When you learn through classical conditioning, an automatic condition response is paired with a specific stimulus or CS becomes associated with an unrelated unconditioned stimulus or US. In order to produce a behavioral response known as a conditioned response or CR, the conditioned response is the learned response to previously neutral stimulus, which is often referred to as Pavlovian conditioning or Pavlovian learning is a form of learning in which a neutral stimulus is paired with a stimulus that elicits response. For example, if a student is bullied at school, they may learn to associate this goal with fear. It could be explained also why some students show a particular dislike of a certain subjects that continue throughout their academic year. So another example is have you heard of Pavlov dogs? That's the experimental conducted by Russian psychologist Ivan Pavlov's. So where and his dog started to salivate when he rang a bell. So this is one of the best example of classical conditioning when a neutral stimulus is paired with a conditioned response. So there are 5 principles of classical conditioning. So the first one is the acquisition. So acquisition refers to the first stage of learning when a response is established, and it refers to the period when stimulus comes to evoke the conditioned response. So example, imagine that you are teaching a penguin to pick a key whenever you ring a bell. Initially, you place some food on the key and sounds a tone right before the penguins begin to peck the key. Whenever he hears the tone, meaning he has acquired the behavior. So the second one is extinction. So extinction, when the conditions stimulus applied repeatedly without being paired with the unconditioned stimulus. So over the time, the learned behavior occurs less often and eventually stops altogether, and conditioned stimulus returns to neural. So again, example, imagine that you taught your dog to shake hands. So over time, the trick became less interesting. So the third one in classical conditioning, uh, spontaneous recovery. So spontaneous recovery. So the appearance of the conditioned response after a rest period or period of lessened response. If the conditioned stimulus and conditioned stimulus are no longer associated, extinction will occur very well. So after a spontaneous recovery, so example again, when you ring the bell, so your dogs run to the kitchen and sit his food bowl. After the response has been conditioned, you stop presenting food after ringing the bell. So over the time, the response became extinguished, and your dog stopped responding to the sounds. So the first one principle of classical conditioning is the stimulus discrimination. So in stimulus discrimination, it involves the ability to distinguish one stimulus and similar to stimuli. In both cases, it means responding only to certain stimuli and not responding to those that are similar. So example, whenever you come home from work, so the first thing you do is to feed your dog. Next one is my second topic. Under the learning theories is a operant learning or stimulus response theory. So what is stimulus? So stimulus, any detectable change in the environment or event that evokes a specific functional reaction in an organ or tissue area of the brain which responds to auditory stimuli. See, in operant learning, it occurs when changes or is as a function of its consequences. So the environmental changes that follow the behavior. So this definition is similar to a law of effect proposed by uh, Edward Thorndike in 1874 to 1949. So according to his principle, actions that are followed by desirable outcomes are more likely to be repeated, while those followed by undesirable outcomes are less likely to be repeated. It is focuses on how reinforcements and punishment can be utilized, either increase or decrease the frequency behavior. So behavior followed by desirable and consequences are more likely to occur become less likely to occur. So ang operant conditioning or stimuli response theory nagpuntig kung giunsa paglig-on og silot mahimong magamit aron madugangan o mapakunhod ang frequency sa usa ka pamatasan. Kung diin ang pamatasan kung diin ang pamatasan nga gisundan sa maayong mga sangputanan, sa mas lagmit nga mahitabo pag-usab sa umaabot. Samtang kadtong gisundan sa mga negatibo nga mga sangputanan mahimong dili kaayo mahitabo or kini usa ka konsepto nga nagtumong sa pagtuo nga ang kinaya nagpakita isip resulta sa interplay tali sa stimulus ug tubag sa laing pagkasulti ang kinaiya dili maglungtad nga wala usa ka matang sa stimulus labing menos gikan sa niini nga paglantaw. So again, stimulus response theory is a concept in psychology that refers to the belief that behaviors manifest is a result of the interplay between stimulus response. In other words, behavior cannot exist without a stimulus of some sort. Less of this perspective. So, example, if you raise your hand to ask question and your teacher praises your polite behavior, you will be more likely to raise your hand the next time you have questioned or comment because the behavior was followed by reinforcement or a desirable outcome. The preceding action is threatened. So again, so another one example. If the dog then gets better at sitting and staying in order to receive the treat, then the dog what? The dog must be responsible to stay and sit properly in order to get the food, or else The dog sitter will gladly to give the food. The dog sitter, yes, the dog sitter will gladly to give the food. Then shows the increased behavior. So if the dog not will not sit and stay properly, the result is he cannot get the food because the dog sitter also will not give the food. That is shows a decreased behavior. So my third topic is about social learning. So in social learning, theory against or suggests that social behavior is learned by observing and imitating the behavior of others by Albert Bintora, the psychologist who developed the social learning theory as an alternative to the earlier work of fellow psychologist B. F. Skinner, known for his influence behaviorism, which is it is a human nature to want to be accepted by others. So we automatically observe how others behave and what the consequences are in order to adapt our behavior. In the term social here, it refers to the fact that one's question and adjust one's behavior based on observation of other people in social setting to achieve outcomes. So Bintora is he is the Canadian American psychologist who coined the actual term of social learning. So social learning also is based on social pedagogy, which also focuses heavily on children's education. The first mention of children's character influenced by society, social environment was by 18th century Genevan philosopher, writer, and composer Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who claimed that human beings are fundamentally good but are unnaturally altered by society. Albert Richard Sayers is an American psychologist investigates how children acquire values, views, and beliefs, and the influence parents have this process. Social pedagogy rather emerged in the 19th and 20th century in the Germany through the non-educationalists and philosophers Karl Menger, Paul Nautort, and Hermann Noll, where it is a relationship-centered approach of using learning, interpersonal connection and well-being to overcome social inequality, also on community level. So according to Bintora, there are four processes that influence learning. So the first one is the awareness. Awareness for us, no, to imitate behavior. So we must first notice it. It must therefore be something that stands out for the mass of our surroundings. Only then do we decide to observe the consequences of this behavior more closely. So the next one, the second one is retention. So retention, we can imitate a behavior only if we remember it. It is necessary to observe a behavior often and possibly apply it to ourselves in order to form a clear memory. So this point is particularly important in social learning. So the third one also we have reproduction. So reproduction, to imitate behavior, we must also able to perform it. We cannot always be in it physically or mentally imitate every behavior, even if we would like to. Our knowledge of our limitation influences whether or not we try to imitate something. So the fourth one is motivation. In motivation, the expected reward of limitation must be appealing enough and extend to the cost. It should be noted that all people respond strongly to vic- vicarious reinforcement. So some individuals do not focus on the consequences of other people's behavior much and instead focus on themselves. Such people are less receptive or social learning. So, according also to Crumbles, the American psychologist professor for Stanford University, there are four factors that we incorporate to decision-making process. So, these factors influence each other in thousands of ways, in unpredictable ways, shaping our beliefs and how we view the world and ourselves. So, these four factors are generalized self-observation. That is the first factor. Generalized self-observation. So in generalized self-observation, it is conscious and unconscious consideration of our abilities, strength, weakness, achievements, and views and resulting conclusion about ourselves. So we define ourselves by what we can do and what accomplish. So the result of these observations influence our future thoughts and action, including career decision. So the second one is generalized worldview. So it is conscious and unconscious observation of the environment and resulting assessment of how it will behave in the future. In the other words, if we form our view of the world and our environment are likely to develop. So the third one, we have task approach skills. So the way we approach tasks, an interplay of genetic factors, environmental influence and learning, experience that we understand and incorporate into decision-making process as our cognitive and behavioral abilities. When we have tasks, we use our self-assessment and experience to define the right approach. So the next one is actions. Actions, it is a learning experience ultimately lead to career decisions. The more we learn about ourselves and the world over time, the more it affects our decision, including our career. So these are the four factors in and decision-making process. So we have also the pros and cons in social learning. So the first one is the advantage of social learning. So we have a natural way to learn. So the most significant advantage of social learning is that everyone uses it naturally every day consciously, right? So you don't have to plan it to set aside time for it because it happens automatically over time. In the working world, this means that we observed our colleagues is particularly pressed for performance or receives a bonus. No, other employees analyze all by themselves what action leads to in order to work the same result. So, so after the natural way to learn, we have also the better skills. So by encouraging sharing thoughts, ideas, experience, and by best practice, you strengthen your employees' productivity and skills. So these tendencies are great for given are great for leverage in organizations. So under the better skills, we have a higher learning retention. In higher learning retention, it is scientifically proven that we only remember 10% from formal learning sources, while the remaining is 90% comes from informal sources and social learning. So by learning something directly from a person, we are able to remember it better because remember things like voices, pitch images, memories, or even a joke during learning that we associate with learning content. So the next one we have the lower cost. So bringing employees together to share subjects matter expertise costs less than a seminar or learning content on the same topic. Then we have also the productivity and sustainability. When employees know how tasks about topic, the information spread and over time, mentoring network is created within the company. So this encourages sharing and reducing need to learn from other sources. So the next one we have employee retention. So retention, meaning employees want to continue their education and they want to share ideas with colleagues. In social learning enables them to do both, creating stronger bonds with each other at the same time. So that and the awareness that the company allows or even encourages this type of exchange increased loyalty. So we have also the better informed. The more frequently employees exchange ideas with their colleagues on a wide range of topics, the more often they look beyond their horizons. So we have also so this broadens their perspective and gives them impressions that help prevent mistakes and increase efficiency. So we have also a collaboration. Learning is not a learning is not only thing that is collaborative in this case. Other factors are naturally included as well. So employees help each other more, often seek advice and help collaborate better and learn along the way the best. Time to learn is to learn is when you need the knowledge. And the next one we have a captured knowledge, captured organizational knowledge. So by sharing our knowledge within our organization, there is a greater chance of certain pieces of information being saved even after crucial employees leave the organization. Then the next one of capture of organization knowledge, we have the solving in real time. So problem solving in real time. So many employees are looking for learning opportunities in a moment of actual need. So the urge to solve problem they cannot solve their own requires collaboration. So usually the first thing humans will do in this situation is asking others for their ideas. This much faster than searching for uh, answer online. So we have also here the next one is inclusion of passive employees. So there are lots of people that are quiet or even afraid to ask questions, right? So in social learning, in a context of learning groups, any other group larger than two peoples make it easier for introverts to learn by listening to other people discussing their question. So the other one, we have also the shorter onboarding times. Shorting onboarding times, so having a colleagues showing you around, answering questions and providing us with the useful tips help us to get used to new job and environment much faster than an online course on a company culture or or responsibilities. So that's all the advantages of social learning. So next we proceed the disadvantages of social learning. So what are the disadvantages of social learning? So social learning also brings professional and psychological rest which should be mentioned. To the first one, we have inner conflict. Since social learning is based on the idea of adapting what is perceived as successful and positive behavior in others, you are learning to behave more like someone else. If you use this tactic too often and too intensely, it can result in the inner conflict. If the new behaviors are contrary to your own views, in the long run, this leads to active internal resistance and prevents any learning process. The second one of disadvantage of social learning, we have the less authenticity. Contrary to what behavioral scientists have heard, social learning does not necessarily affect a person's personality. In the most case, it would take long-term, repeated imitation and adapt a new behavior as one's on or lose one's connection to one personality. So, moreover, people often notice it themselves when something doesn't feel authentic. This is the third disadvantage of social learning. We have the loss of innovation. So personal thoughts, process opinions and views are often neglected. So favoring behavior that promise the greatest success. However, no, since new and unconventional ideas to bring progress and innovation, this learning technique should not be used too much. So the fourth disadvantage, we have an expected obstacle. So very few people knew their limits, right? So strengths and weaknesses really well. It is often not possible to imitate the behavior another because unknown obstacle can unknown obstacle can arise. Where this can result in frustration, which leads to resignation. So the fifth one, we have the consequence for self-esteem. So most people cannot tell the difference between observation or imitation and a comparison to themselves. If we compare ourselves with others, we usually compare visible indicators like performance and result. So this led to frustration and disappointment in most cases. So we typically compare ourselves to people who can do something better than us in order to learn from them. So, as a result, such comparison will always be to our disadvantages for people without a solid self-esteem. So, such thing can have psychological consequences in the long run. Therefore, care should be taken to distinguish social learning from personal comparison, clearly and to incorporate a positive reinforcement. So the next one we have the A self-doubt. So everyone is a teacher and students simultaneously there is an uncertainty about standards and there can be a self-doubt. So the seventh one, the next one is a measuring. Measuring requires modern solution. So there are few ways to measure social learning apart from content usage unless use modern learning platform. So the next one of measuring requires modern solution. We have also the a negative assumptions. So negative assumptions as social media and videos are considered waste of time, leisure time in many minds. So especially nowadays are many fake news and internet, so it can lead to a negative assumption. So next in negative assumption, we have the necessary intervention. So in necessary intervention, group discussion needs to be led because otherwise they quickly digress and return into random private conversations, losing focus on the topics at hand. So that is a necessary intervention. So we have the last uh, disadvantage in social learning. The last one we have the requirements. So requirements also attention, the retention, replicability, and motivation must be present each participant for it to work. It can lead to disadvantage in social learning. So overall, the most example of social learning situation are television commercial. As we observe, commercial suggest that drinking a certain beverage or using a particular hair shampoo will make us popular and win the admiration of attractive people. So, so those are the disadvantage of decision making in social learning. Uh, I hope you learned something about my topics. Thank you for thank you for watching.